public meeting notes anyway. Hopefully Neil will be able to join.
Great, I've just started the recording.
Thank you. All right. Welcome everyone to the October 1st, 2020 meeting of the County of San Mateo Parks Commission. My name is Heather Green, and I will get us going. Fellow commissioners, do you want to introduce yourselves on first, and then we'll have, I'm sorry, who will be doing kind of the meeting introduction?
Commissioner, I'm sorry, you're referring to the
just to march us through the video conferencing rules and all of that. I'm sorry.
Would you like me to do a roll call now, or do you want me to do the?
Why don't you do the, Janet, if you want to take the introduction to the meeting about public participation and everything like that, and then we can do the roll call. Thank you.
No problem. For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raised hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comment period, and for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. Please note that members of the public must wait for my prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raised hand function. For example, you cannot raise your hand at the beginning of the meeting for an agenda item that is later in the meeting. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your account and inform you that you may begin speaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have a flag image this time?
I do, just give me 1 second.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, and we'll begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 2, roll call, please.
Commissioner Marlies? Commissioner Marlies?
I do not see him.
Commissioner Mena? Or Mene?
Sam, can you unmute yourself?
There you go.
Present.
Thank you.
Commissioner Okello?
Present.
Chair Green?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we are still a body of 4, is that right? Got it. Okay. Item number 3, public comment. This item is for persons wishing to address the commission on any parks related matters not otherwise on the meeting agenda.
I do not see any hands raised. So
Okay, I'll get it. Just a second. Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment for item 3. Item 4, action to set the agenda. Do I have a motion?
No move.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. And I guess we roll call vote that. Or
Commissioner Okello?
Yes.
Commissioner Mene?
Hey.
Commissioner Marlies is still not on the call. I don't see him. And Chair Green?
aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to item 5, the Parks Foundation Executive Director's Report. Director Calderon.
No, this
I'm
is
sorry, Michelle Beasley. I'm sorry. I always do that every time now. I have it. Parks Foundation Executive Director Michelle Beasley. I see.
There she is. Michelle, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh, and now we can hear you too. Hello.
Michelle Beasley, Executive Director with the San Mateo County Parks Foundation. I'm actually going to keep my comments very short because I want to get to the main event. Usually I can show my picture. I would hold up our most recent newsletter. So just imagine I'm holding it up. I want to direct your attention to that which is on our website. And we profile our amazing San Mateo County Park Rangers and just how fantastic they were. I recognized Mid-Penn and RCD also provided a lot of support. And so I think just a big shout out to the human capital that helped protect our land. So yeah, if you haven't read it, check it out on our website. And that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the regular agenda, item 6. We have item 6.1, the CZU Lightning Complex Fires presentation. Nicholas?
perfect. Thank you. And I will go ahead and share my screen. I have the PowerPoint for this. Here.
Just while Director Calderon's getting started, I think I do see Neil over in attendees.
Beautiful. And all right, so we'll go ahead and get started here. So the whole goal of today's meeting is to discuss the CZU lightning complex fires and land management, possible land management strategies and projects that are going on. One of the things that this fire is really going to push us to do is to evaluate our land management practices and our approach and really dedicate more time than we already are to understanding it and to meeting with subject matter experts and to rely on the science and the data out there to drive decision making. And so what we'll see today is a sample of some of the options out there and some of the strategies that people are using to improve the ecological value of their land. But first, we want to cover what happened just about a month ago. So the CZU lightning complex fire, and by the way, just so we start, what you're seeing in front of me here is a satellite image of the fire itself. So that is a high level view of the damage and destruction that was done by the fire. And what we know is that the fire was started on August 16th, August 17th, and it was started by a series of lightning strikes during a dry lightning storm. And the fire initially started outside the boundaries of the park, and we were monitoring it. And over time, the fire quit. And over time, before it was fully contained, it consumed over 86,000 acres within Pescadero Creek County Park, which was the only park directly impacted by the fire. It burned 2,845 acres. The fires were fully contained on September 20th or 22nd, which was not too long ago. And so now we go into the restoration and the repair phase. But I want to show the commission these images here, which will show you what the fire did over time. And so you can see how over time the fire grew and how it spread. And what we know was that what happened was the winds were coming from north to south and really driving the fire into Santa Cruz County. And that was something that really devastated Santa Cruz County and prevented the fire from really taking more of a toll on San Mateo County than what it already did. What you see here in front of you is a visual of what portion of Pescadero Creek County Park burned. So as I said earlier, 2,800 acres in Pescadero Creek were impacted by the fire. And what you'll see along the northeast line there, that solid red line there, that's Old Hall Road. And that is a fire road. It was used as a fire line. It's also a popular recreation trail in the park. And a lot of effort went into making sure that the fire did not jump that line. And the devastation that could have been caused had it jumped that line is something that we were very fortunate we did not experience. I'm going to, however, from this point on, turn it over to Scott Lombardi. And I'd like Scott to really walk everyone through what happened on the ground. So as soon as the fire broke, Scott went down to Pescadero Creek County Park and he led the crews in their fire containment efforts. And he worked with CAL FIRE directly on the activities that we undertook. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the work that the Rangers did. This was the first wildfire of this size in a century in San Mateo County. It was actually the biggest one. It is the first wildfire this department's dealt with. And to see how the staff responded, to see how the staff went straight into action and worked with CAL FIRE and Mid-Penn and other entities to make sure that we were protecting the residents and the properties in this county and making sure that that fire did not spread throughout Pescadero Creek County Park, did not spread into Portola Redwood State Park, did not spread into San McDonald County Park or Memorial Park. The efforts to protect those lands was is humbling and inspiring. And if you've heard us talk about the amount of work we're putting into Memorial Park, and making sure that we were able to protect those resources was extremely important. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Scott, and I'll control the slides, but let Scott walk everyone through kind of what was happening on the ground.
Sure. Thank you, Nick. So just kind of a snapshot, like Nick said, we had over 2,500 lightning strikes in that dry lightning storm that we had. And it was quite evident on Monday morning. I think they started that Sunday night, that Monday morning on Butno Ridge. You want to try the first slide, Nick? Let's see if we've got that first one of the fires. So this is Butno Ridge. As you can see, there's basically 3 different columns of smoke. So we had 3 separate fires burning on top of the ridge. And what happened later was that those fires actually converged and made one. So they were burning from the backside. The winds were driving south. We were hoping it wasn't going to come across the ridge line and drop down. The smoke column to the farthest right actually is over by Dearborn and Lomamar. So we had 2 different fires burning at 2 ends of the park. So it became apparent. Well, first I just want to say a big thank you to all the Parks Department employees, whether they were on the front line or behind the scenes, from fiscal, admin, NRM, communications. They did an outstanding job as a team. Things got very fluid. Nick was in the EOC working with the Sheriff's Department. While this was going on, Rangers were in high gear working evacuations in Gazo's Creek. They were driving into firestorms. It was really incredible. So we set up an incident command at Memorial Park. We had split off in groups where we had people that actually took these pictures, were watching the fire because communications were kind of sketchy to let us know if the fire was coming towards us so we could evacuate. We were prepared to pull as much equipment out of Memorial Park. If the fire got down in Lomamar and jumped Pescadero Road, we were going to lose our corporation yard and all of our equipment and possibly the campground. Nick was instrumental in leading staff into different districts and rotating as many people as we could down to the fire area. We were cutting a 20-foot fuel break all the way around the campground with a 20-man crew every day with chippers just to give a buffer in case that fire came down to the edge of the park, and it did. It was right there. Go ahead to the next slide, Nick. So this is from the top of the ridge up in Pescadero. Luckily, we had a contractor working in there with us with RCD. RCD did an amazing job with us. CAL FIRE, Mid-Penn. I can't even mention how many agencies showed up. We had people from Scotts Valley. I had crews that were from Idaho. I had never seen so many people show up to try to save what we had going here. But the contractor that was in here working with RCD cut a fire road at the top of Buteno Ridge so CAL FIRE could get in there and try to stop the fire. And by the time we got the road cut, the fire was coming down towards Old Hall Road. So that access point was cut off at this time. And as you can see up in the trees, some of these trees were, most of it's a low ground fire. Some of it is getting up 10, 12, 20 feet up in the trees. And that's the one thing that we did not want was a canopy fire, because that would have blew from treetop to treetop and started a real problem. Next slide, Nick. So this is kind of showing how much that ridge, it blew up. And the road that's down below it is about, Old Hall's about 8 miles long. And we had a large construction project at Dark Gulch, which did not give us access to this. So the only way around to this section was an 1.5-hour drive through Alpine Road until we got the contractor to cut an access road. So things were getting kind of sketchy. CAL FIRE did not have large equipment resources since their priority one was the Berryessa fire, which took a priority. So we were the only game in town that had bulldozers and a masticator to start cutting fire line on the Old Hall Road and to start masticating vegetation to try to stop the burning. Next slide, Nick. You can see how hot some of this fire goes. Some of that duff is 10, 12 inches deep, gets extremely hot. You see some of the root balls and it traveling up trees. Some of those root balls and trees are still burning today out there. They're still hot in the root systems that are in the ground. It's tremendous how much heat was out there. Next slide, Nick. You can kind of see the heavy smoke. This was a daily thing. Heavy smoke. Every day we were out there with CAL FIRE and the fire agencies, not only with our bulldozers and masticating equipment, which on the first 2 nights our officers actually slept in the equipment. Most days we're running 14, 16 hours a day. And I can't say enough for the Rangers. They wouldn't go home. They wouldn't quit. We were cutting down trees that were actually on fire to keep them out of the canopy and down on the ground. Here's a meeting with myself, CAL FIRE, David Vasquez, Catherine Wright. I believe this picture was when we were preparing for Sunday night. I believe it was the 23rd. We were supposed to have another firestorm and a dry lightning storm, and thank goodness it didn't happen. They were expecting 50-mile-an-hour winds, and it would have jumped the road and would have been catastrophic. I believe the next spot that we would have been able to stop it would have been Skyline in 92, and that would have been just devastating. We were at this time every day, hourly, dealing with CAL FIRE, helping them take hazard trees down that were on fire. We were also moving our heavy equipment to make evacuation routes for if firefighters got trapped in a firestorm. So we were cutting secondary lines across Pescadero Creek Road up in the horse camp for containment lines. Secondary, if it jumped the road, their next that they were going to be able to try to fight it was going to be in the horse camp, which was about a little less than 3 miles away. So it was very important, and we were very lucky, and I was very proud that we had the equipment there to try to set up evacuation routes. And we were very lucky that we had that contractor working on Dark Gulch, because they were able to pull out a bridge that's been out for 5 years and reinstall a bridge in less than 2 days, that we were able to get fire tankers from CAL FIRE through Red Tree property, which was tremendous because we were unable to get any water source on this fire. At the end of every day, we started getting high winds, and we get helicopter drops in Lomamar because that fire would fire up every day. And at that point, we start to wondering if we had to evacuate our staff out of there, since there's only one way in, one way out. We could either go in the coast or out 84. So it got a little sketchy. Next slide, Nick. Here's one of my rangers, Brian Christopher. He dropped this over 100-foot tall fir tree that was on fire. We had to get it dropped because I learned a lot about fir trees in high fire. The sap content in the root ball makes them extremely have a high rate of failure. Brian scampered up this hill. The hill was on fire. When he went up there to cut this, firefighters were hosing the hill down to put the flames out while he was standing up here and his boots were still smoking when he dropped this tree. Pretty impressive. Next one, Nick. Here's Rogelia castaneda cutting up logs that are on the ground so they could help extinguish them with the water tankers that were coming by. This road, Old Hall Road, our equipment on it, it's normally about a 12-foot wide road. We punched it out to about 30 feet wide, and we were hoping that that would hold the containment. Next slide, Nick. Here's a picture of the tree that Brian dropped. Here's our D5 dozer with Ronnie Cardozo, our operator, pushing the tree back into the fire. You can see how steep this hillside is. It's on fire coming right down to Old Hall Road, and that is the containment line that we're trying to haul. You can see how big that tree is compared to that D5 dozer. That was a big tree that Brian dropped. Here's a picture after the fire on top of Butno Ridge. It's just like a moonscape. This is what Nicholas was talking about, is after the fire now we have to look at hazard assessment, and a lot of these trees that are a hazard now will have to be dropped and cleaned up. So there's a lot of work in front of us. You can kind of see it's like a moonscape. That fire was so hot in there that it just ate everything. And you can see the crust that's on the ground. It looks like it's solid ground, but it's not. And a lot of those roots that are down 3-4 feet in the ground are still burning. And when you walk across that crust, you could fall through it 3-4 feet into the ground. So it's very unsafe to be walking in this area until we have a chance to assess it and actually make trails through here to take out some of the damaged trees. Go ahead, Nick. You can see this is right off the top of the ridge. This is Portola Trail. Hardly anything left up there. It just ate everything. It was so hot. It was very impressive how fast this fire went, and how extremely lucky we got that we were able to contain it where we did on that road. I think if we would have got that storm as it was predicted on that Sunday, we would have been in real trouble. But I think they did an outstanding job. I thank all the agencies, RCD, Mid-Penn came through huge, CAL FIRE, every Bay Area city fire agency, I think, was there. People out of Scotts Valley. It was tremendous. Great effort. Next slide, Nick.
That was it.
That was it. So I'm glad to answer any questions. Hope that wasn't too overwhelming, but if you have any questions, I'll gladly answer them.
And I'd like to take a minute briefly just to, on top of everything Scott said, really pull together that this was really a regional effort. And when you looked on the ground, what was going on, you know, CAL FIRE was leading all of this. So CAL FIRE was providing direction every day, even though they had numerous fires going on throughout the state. And even though the fire was really pushing south, they were making sure that they were providing clear guidance on a day-to-day basis as to what they needed in order to contain that fire. Early in the fire, Mid-Penn sent a fire crew down to help hold that line, which was instrumental. As Scott said, we were very lucky that we had a project going on with the Resource Conservation District, who you'll hear from today, who had a contractor on site who played just an instrumental role in holding that line. And the way everyone prioritized public safety and was not worried about getting caught up in frankly, you know, who's going to do this, who's going to do it. You know, we got together, we talked about it. It was just all about getting it done and making sure we were taking the right action. And it was absolutely remarkable to see, to be a part of. And these types of experiences are obviously destructive to the landscape, but it was positive and reassuring to see how everyone came together to respond. I do want to, on behalf of the department, thank everyone who committed resources and time and effort to containing the fire, because it really made a positive impact on the lives of the county residents. Had it gone further, it would have been absolutely devastating.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation and for the work. I don't think there are really words or enough time on earth to communicate all the gratitude that I know that we all feel. We're very lucky to have all who contributed, and I think I'm really, you said humbling, and that's the right word in my opinion. I'll ask if my fellow commissioners want to ask any questions. Maybe just for clarity, I'll go one by one. Commissioner Manna, do you have anything you want to ask or comment?
First off, it was time of uncertainty. I mean, obviously we're here on the coast and in the peninsula where we don't see the Napa, Sonoma, Southern California, Pacific Northwest tragedies, but it actually got kind of to the coast. Pacific Half Moon Bay was very smoky. So I think when all this is said and done, I mean, I'm down to throw a big celebration for Cal Fire and everybody. If the county, is the Parks Department, or we somehow have a big presentation to where Cal Fire or somebody from the spokespeople, or we, along with maybe other commissioners, send out commendable letters to those in other states who came out to help, because this was serious. I mean, Santa Cruz is 45 minutes away, and I mean, this could have been something else. So, Cal Fire, man, if you guys are hearing us out there, God bless you guys, and really, this could have been a turn of events where it would have been on the downside turn.
Thank you. Commissioner Okello, any questions or remarks?
Yeah, I'd like to join my colleague, Commissioner Manning, applauding the staff of the Parks and Recreation Department, Nicholas, Scott, and all the rangers. It's just amazing watching those pictures and seeing, the kind of work that they had to do to stem the fire, and the extent to which, regardless of the fact that there's so much acreage that was destroyed, the extent to which you're successful in fighting and winning that battle. I do have two questions. One, Scott, in your report, I did not hear any mention of either the Public Works Department, what other departments in the county were involved in helping out in this endeavor. And then the second question is, to what extent can we rally, volunteer in these kinds of battles? Because I'm sitting here thanking God, I would have loved to be there to the extent that it would have been allowable, to help in some capacity, either at the incident center or play a role. What kind of role do you foresee for people that are willing to come out and help in such emergencies?
I think the first question about the county departments that were helping, I'll leave that to Nick to answer, since he was in the EOC and instrumental with the Sheriff's Department, everybody that was involved there. But on a volunteer basis for us, I'll tell you what the highlight of the day was. Alice's restaurant was sending food down to us 2 to 3 times a day to all the firefighters and everybody that was on the front line. So, that was big right there. I know La Honda Volunteer Fire Department was standing by, helping with logistics, getting us whatever we needed. I just think the volunteer at the time, the food and logistics coming to us, water, keeping people out of the danger zone in case it really went bad on us was probably the best way that we ran it. But after the fact, I would think that there will be opportunity for volunteers to help us with some veg management and stuff after we get the winterization done and we start getting some of these hazards out of the way.
Yeah, and Commissioner O'Kelly, to answer your question about county departments that were involved. So when the county activates the Emergency Operations Center, it pulls on the different resources from the departments to do various tasks. So for example, while Cruz was in the park itself doing work, the sheriff's office was working on evacuating areas that were identified by CAL FIRE as mandatory, or that was identified as high-risk areas that the sheriff's office determined they wanted to evacuate. So the sheriff's office would mark an area for evacuation and their staff would go out and oversee evacuation. And Public Works was working on road closures and traffic control. And now that the fire has been contained, though, there's a whole different element of what needs to be done. And that is really what is impacting the public on the longer term basis than the fire. So the fire has been contained, but now individuals who may have lost their homes, may have had property damage, what is going to happen for those individuals? And that's where a lot of county departments are involved. Environmental health, planning and building, Department of Public Works, Office of Sustainability, Health and Human Services, so or the Human Services Agency. So there's a lot of different county departments currently involved in how do we repair what has been done to this point. So when the county activates that Emergency Operations Center, it's no longer just a matter of you work for parks, you work for planning, you work for public works. They're all disaster service workers, and the county's pulling on us to provide whatever services we specialize in and are capable of providing. And as it was with COVID and as it is with this fire, it is an all hands-on situation, and every county department is doing a great job contributing.
Nicholas, may I add to that?
Of course you may.
So in addition to the county departments, my name is Kellix. You'll be hearing from me shortly with the Resource Conservation District, or RCD. In addition to county departments, there's other local government entities that the county is partnering with. So for example, the RCD, the county is providing financial support to enable us to do a lot of site-specific technical assistance with people whose properties have burned, whether they're public or private lands.
So could I add an additional question? And this is to start. Because I was thinking more of people actually involved in the actual fighting of the fire, cutting those dangerous trees and so on and so forth. So in terms of additional resources you'd have needed that would have made your life a little easier, particularly in terms of personnel, I think what would you have needed?
There was limitations though and some serious constraints. Only one road in, one road out. We had to be very aware of how many people we got stacked on that road in case a firestorm came the other direction. So went at it with the minimum that we felt that we could evacuate safely in a hurry if we had to. And that's why we were opening up our fire roads going into the horse camp, which were going north. Because if the winds would have changed and went north, that's the way that we were going to have to get out of there. So I think we probably maximized everything we could at that point. And we kept a close eye on the safety. Like I said before, we actually had spotters up on top of Haskins Hill watching that fire, because every time the wind kicked up, we'd see the flames come across the treetops, and then it's getting 60, 80 feet in the air, and that's going to be a problem. And then we start notifying people that we got to get out. So I think I appreciate what you're saying, and I always take an extra hand in helping, but I think we kept the constraints on it because we didn't want a disaster to happen if it turned around on us.
Getting back to volunteers, I'd be willing to volunteer as part of a volunteer corps should anything like this happen ever again. And we know for sure that it's going to happen. And so creating a volunteer corps and giving them the appropriate kind of training such that we don't have our rangers working, 16-hour days, so at least you can have a group of folks that you can deploy, to give them some rest. Even if that corps just works for 4 hours, but at least give that essential rest, to our rangers. So that's really the direction that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and that's a good point to make, and that's how I mentioned La Honda Volunteer Fire Department. I know a lot of people signed up for being volunteers out there in La Honda in that area right now, just for that same reason.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Mirrlees?
Yeah. Is my mute off? Can people hear me? Okay. Yeah, Scott and Nicholas, thank you so much. That was overwhelming. It was you were able to jump in and help CAL FIRE contain the fire. It's adding one more list of experiences and possible requirements for rangers. Biological resource control, marine biology, law enforcement, trail building, and now firefighting. And so it shows you how important it is to have a well-trained team of rangers that you can call into an emergency situation, this or any other emergency situation. That we have you guys here is an incredible community resource for many different reasons. And it's overwhelming right now to think about this fire and to think about what it'll mean for the future in terms of bringing that land back into some semblance of usability and sustainability. I think there'll probably be an unlimited amount of volunteer opportunities for that in terms of planting trees and grading and cleanup possibly in the future. And also, for in the future, we need to think that maybe this will happen again, and maybe this is going to be happening more often, and develop a long-term strategy in terms of how to manage our forests, and maybe tree cutting is another thing that you'll be looking for your rangers to do, which already do so many different separate things for the community. So yeah, it seems like the scope of the Parks Department is widening at every turn. And well, thank God you guys were there and able to bring your team to bear on the emergency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I guess just a couple of questions. A couple of times when you were talking, Scott, and also Nick, you were saying that we got lucky here. We had this resort. We had the machinery in the right in at least a relatively accessible place, and we had a contractor who was able to. How are you guys thinking about kind of making your own luck for the next time, because there will be one, and how do we deploy resources so that they're used?
Yeah, that's something that we're assessing as a department right now. We're going to have to, as you'll see later today, we're going to be talking about our post-fire actions and what it is that we need to be doing. And that's our primary concern right now is how are we going to winterize the park? And how are we going to make sure that we're ready for this winter? After that, we're going to go through an after-action review, and we're going to look at the incident and things that we liked how they went, things that we would have done differently. And we're going to look at our department operations, and we're going to see how we have to revise those and what type of training and certifications do we need to be looking at, and what type of equipment do we need to have. I think the one thing that's gone unsaid, and that's my fault, is the credit that the Board of Supervisors deserve right now. And the reality is the board has been very generous with the department when it comes to Measure K funding. And because of that, we were able to replace many of our chainsaws and pole saws. We were able to get a new bulldozer. We were able to get a new masticator. We were able to spend more time both as a staff and with contractors doing responsible fuel reduction throughout our park system. So we need to continue that effort, and we need to look at, so we need to continue that effort in the name of preventative care, essentially. And then we also need to look at how are we going to respond going forward and during the next incident. And I say it that way because the reality is, like most natural disasters, it's not really a matter of if, but a matter of when. And so how will we respond when that happens? Those are things that we're looking at, but we'll need to go through that after action review first.
Thanks. And also just related to the equipment, I think you said you were the only ones with the bulldozers and masticators. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like,
Just
truly the only ones.
yes, I just think it was very hard for CAL FIRE to get resources because of the large fire that was in Berryessa. That was, I forget how many square miles that came out to be. All resources and air was on that fire. And I believe we were a number 2 rating for number 2 fire. We were able to get helicopters with water drops that were dropping on the neighborhood in Wur Road on Lomamar, because that thing would fire up every day, and they would come in with helicopters, drop water. I think we got 1 retardant drop, but our department, we do a lot of road work, we do a lot of masticating, we do a lot of chipping. So as Nicholas has said, the board has been very good to the department in purchasing the equipment that we need. We have another piece that we're going to be presenting to them, but over the last probably 7 years, I think we've done pretty good and upgraded everything to where it meets air emissions. So we have all top end regulatory correct equipment for the job. And I would have to go one step further in saying my relationship with CAL FIRE, I've been in this department almost 16 years now, and I've worked side by side with Rich Sampson and others, and we have a very good working relationship. And when he needs equipment to help him do things, I've always put the department in a position to help him as logistic support. So we kind of worked hand in hand. It worked. He told me what he wanted, and we got it done.
That's wonderful to hear. And I mean, yeah, I know relationships are so important, especially when things are in a crisis, to really be able to trust each other and know each other. And so we're so lucky to have you and that longstanding relationship. I think my thought kind of on what Commissioner Akella was saying, I think looking ahead and understanding, yeah, you can't just like send a bunch of untrained people in to fight a fire. Thinking about resources though, also that we could offer an opportunity to line up on the equipment side, because there is agriculture and there are other people with heavy equipment kind of on the edges of where there might be a future event. And so maybe even just like some kind of registry of people who might offer their stuff that could support beyond what we even have if we're well supplied for our usual operations and even our emergency operations, but to have kind of that surge capacity identified in the private sector or other partner. I know we have other partners here today who I'm sure have some resources. So just thinking about centralizing that in advance.
Yes, Commissioner, you're absolutely correct. And most of those sign up with CAL FIRE. And
Okay.
the COVID situation, a lot of the local people who had equipment were unable to get signed up to work with the CAL FIRE crew. So take equipment in those fire sites, they've got to be, and here COVID hit us again there too.
Yeah.
Thank goodness we had some equipment we could offer to them.
Well, for the fire when there's not also a pandemic.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you see we have other items under the same, also under item 6. Do you want to, it's just a discussion item. So, but I also see that there's an above average number of attendees here. So we want to take a moment for public comment, or would you rather, Nicholas, wait till the end of the regular agenda?
I see Craig shaking his head yes.
I think you should take public comment on this agenda item before you move on to the next one.
Okay, thank you very much. So public comment on item 6.1. And Janet, do you want to remind people how to give that public comment?
Of course, we're now opening public comment for item 6.1. If your hand is raised, your name will be called for this item. I will lower your hand after you speak. Those joining by telephone can press *9 to raise your hand now. Let's give people a few more seconds. I don't see any hands raised yet.
Would you mind just reminding people how to put up their little blue hand? Oh, there's one. Wonderful.
Oh, perfect. I do see one hand raised. I have Lenny Roberts. Lenny, please accept this request. Unmute your microphone and begin speaking. You'll have 2 minutes, and I will notify you when your time ends. Please give me 1 second while I start my timer.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? All right. All right. I did send Nicholas a blog post that that we put up 2 days ago. I'm Lenny Roberts with Committee for Green Foothills, actually now called Green Foothills, which we provided some reflections on the recent CZU complex fire. And we particularly focused on Pescadero Creek County Park, since that is of such importance in our county and was the area most affected. I think that one thing that was fortunate is that the fire was not of the highest intensity burning in this forested area. And there are certainly areas that are more highly flammable than others. And many of the species of trees that are flammable did burn, but much of the redwood forest is going to be fine and will be resilient. But we also want to be sure that the long-term planning for recovery and restoration is done, as Nicholas already has pointed out, based on stewardship and sound science. And we look forward to working with the county in whatever way we can. And we also want to just second all the thanks to all the responders to this fire, which is it's such a emotional time for everybody, particularly with respect to people's homes and their lives. So we were very lucky in San Mateo County in so many ways. But I just wanted to thank Nicholas and all the park staff and all the rest of county staff for the involvement in this response to this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Just a reminder to raise your hand. You go into the participants menu, and then down at the bottom there's a little raise hands button. I'll put up your blue hand. Okay. Seeing none, public comments on this item is closed, and thank you again. I think we'll just keep saying thank you for the rest of the night and our lives. Item 6.2, active stewardship strategies and projects, a handful of presentations, beginning with 6.2.1 from the Peninsula Open Space Trust.
And if I may, Chair, I'd just like to first introduce Noel and Dan from Post and thank them for making the time to share with us today. Post is an amazing partner of ours, and has a lot of good lessons learned from the various properties that they manage. And I often find myself contacting them for ideas and guidance. So I really appreciate both Noel and Dan making the time to participate today.
Thank you, Nicholas. Should I share my screen then with my slides, or are you going to pull that up?
Yeah, it's up to you. We can do either way.
Why don't I share it, then I can control it. Let me. Can you see the slides, or do you see the notes? It's always impossible to tell.
Just the slides.
Okay.
You know, that's my main fear also in life.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Noelle Chambers Thurlow. I'm Vice President of Conservation at Peninsula Open Space Trust, or POST. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dan Olstein, who's our Director of Stewardship. And I'm going to start off today just with a really brief overview of POST and who we are, and then talk about a little bit about how we approach land management, and then talk about impacts from the CZU fire on us and how we're approaching it right now. And then I'll turn it over to Dan to talk about San Vicente Redwoods, which is the almost 9,000 acre property in Santa Cruz County that we owned that entirely burned, and how we were approaching land management before, and how we were preparing for fire, and now that it has burned, what we're doing right now. So first, about POST, our mission is to protect open space on the peninsula and in the South Bay for the benefit of all. And our vision is to create a network of protected lands where people and nature connect and thrive. And we were founded in 1977 as a nonprofit partner to our local public agencies. We raise money from private and public sources, and we work confidentially and flexibly with landowners to acquire lands and then transfer to public agencies for their long-term ownership. And we've done a number of projects with San Mateo County Parks. We also hold conservation easements on private properties. And our work is structured right now into 4 program areas. So we have a farmland program, public access, wildlife linkages, and redwoods. Our working area is the Peninsula and South Bay, so includes all of the Santa Cruz Mountains in San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Santa Cruz counties. And this map shows our currently owned lands in the yellow color and lands that we have conservation easements on in blue. Our business model is not to hold and own land long-term, especially for public access, but instead to transfer. But we do own a lot of land, and sometimes for many years. Right now, we own over 20,000 acres in 32 properties that range from very small, less than an acre, to the almost 9,000 acre San Vicente Redwoods property, which, if you can see my cursor, it's here on this map. And we also hold 35 conservation easements that total around 14,000 acres. So even though we're not set up to own land and manage it long-term, we do take care of the land during our ownership, and we take that role seriously. We focus on transformative management to set properties up for the future, and often taken on ownership of properties that have been degraded and starting them on a trajectory towards restoration and ecological health. In our Redwoods program, before the recent fires, we've been focused on how to best protect and restore our coastal redwood ecosystems. Given the history of this region with clear cutting and poor land management practices, our local forests needed help and still do need help to get them on a path towards an old growth redwood ecosystem. We've also recognized the severity of fire risk in our region, which combined with forest management history and the reality of climate change into the future mean that there's an increased risk of fire going forward. And we have a great staff with technical expertise in redwood ecosystems and fire ecology, including our Redwoods program manager and director of conservation science. So we started to do more selective thinning of redwood forests, shaded fuel breaks, and prescribed fires on properties that we control, particularly on San Vicente Redwoods, which Dan will talk more about. But while we contemplated fire, we had not contemplated or really anticipated a fire of this scale in our region. It's not something that we thought was a reality for our region. And so it's a lot to wrap our minds around. This map shows the area of the CZU lightning complex fire and then post-protected lands in dark green. So this is the, let's see, where's my mouse? San Vicente Redwoods property here. We had some properties near Butano State Park impacted, and as well as some easement properties that were impacted, but by far the largest impact is San Vicente Redwoods. And right now we're focused on an assessment of our properties as well as properties for our partners and assessing opportunities for where we go from here. We're coordinating very closely with our public and private partners, including county parks and others like the Santa Cruz Mountains Stewardship Network, Save the Redwoods League, Semper Virens Fund, state parks, and others on a regional effort to figure out where we go from here, not just in the region that burned, but also in the entire region, as fire is a new reality for our landscape at this kind of scale. So we are thinking about how to research, how to understand this more. There's not a lot of existing research that's been done on fire in redwood ecosystems. And so we're thinking about what can we do to learn from this and what can we do to be better prepared for the future. So that's a brief overview of how we're approaching it. And I'm going to turn it over to Dan to talk about more depth about San Vicente Redwoods.
Thanks, Noel. And I assume we'll control the slides with you, and you can drive, and I'll prompt you if need be. Thanks, everyone. And as Noel mentioned, I'm Post Director of Land Stewardship. I've been at Post a little over 7 years in that role. And I'm going to talk primarily about our management down at San Vicente Redwoods, focusing a lot on the work that we were doing pre-fire. And as Noel said, thinking about the history of stewardship and the long trajectory of stewardship to try to work towards a more resilient and sustainable redwood ecosystem on that property, kind of transform it from the degraded property and condition that it was in when we bought it about 10 years ago to where it is now. And then the last couple slides I'll touch on what we're beginning to understand about the impacts from the CZU fire and how we're going to try to move forward from there. So, as Noel said, this is the San Vicente Redwoods property, 9,000 acres. We co-own the property with Semper Virens Fund, and then partner with two of our other land conservation partners, Save the Redwoods League, which owns the conservation easement over the property, and a land trust of Santa Cruz County, which was also integral in the protection of the property and has really been the lead on developing public access on that property. You can go ahead. So this property was purchased by Post in 2011. And as Noel said, there's a legacy across the Santa Cruz Mountains that is also evident on this property of clear cutting. In the early 1900s, nearly the entire Santa Cruz Mountains looked a lot like this. And so, it's one thing when we see, the impacts from the fire today to think about, how this landscape looked a little over 100 years ago. And it has, recovered from perhaps worse. But this is really important history when we think about how we manage the property going forward. It's not for the most part, a pristine landscape. It's not a virgin forest. There were pockets of old growth very much in the creek bottoms, but nothing like you see, for instance, at Big Basin with some of these large stands of old growth, or even in pockets, at Memorial County Park and other parts of the park system. So you can go ahead. Keeping in mind this history, it was when we purchased the property, one of the first things that we focused on was working with our partners to develop a conservation vision for the property. And part of that conservation vision was really identifying different zones within the property, different reserve areas, where there would be different priorities in terms of the various goals that we're trying to achieve. So about 40 to 45% of the property was identified as working forest. And this was an area where we were continuing to do sustainable timber harvest that would be managed in such a way that it would be consistent with local forest practice rules but would allow for continued sustained harvest over time, growing larger trees, but also allowing us to re-enter on about an every 15 to 20 year cycle, which is less frequent than the existing county regulations, but in a way that helps grow a more resilient forest, and also allowed us to take revenue from that management and pump it back into other parts of the property where we had a real focus on restoration. And that include both the restoration reserves, which were focused in the sort of northern part of the property up near Empire Grade, as well as the southern part of the property down closer to Bonnie Doon and what is now the Chitoni Coast Dairies, close to Davenport. Those restoration reserves, our management was more focused. It's still active management, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a couple of slides. But the idea was, what are actions that we can take to move the forest towards old growth conditions more quickly? How can we accelerate towards growing those large trees that we know provide that late seral habitat that is really beneficial for species like marble murrelet and other kind of old growth dependent species. Just quickly in the working forest, we have done a couple of, actually it's on the next slide, shows sort of the activities that are on here. Under our ownership, we've done 2 THPs. The first one you see kind of in the bottom center of the property, Timber Harvest 1, about 400 acres total that we implemented over a period of about 3 years. This is in the San Vicente working forest part of the property in the San Vicente watershed. And again, this was something that, the Santa Cruz mountains have some of the strictest timber harvest regulation in the world. It's all single tree selection and pretty significant buffers on stream corridors and all that. And our management that we developed through our management plan has an even lighter touch than that. We had started in on the harvest for Timber Harvest 2, which includes the area just to the north of Timber Harvest 1, as well as up at the far northern part of the property. We had done some of that timber harvesting this year. As you'll see later on, this is a part of the property that burned very hot in the fire just a month ago. It's just where the fire came from, and it kind of came in really hot. I'll talk about some of the other activities that we had going on the property, but this just kind of highlights the broad range of activity that is ongoing on this property. In addition to our staff and our partner staff that are dedicated to this work and spend a lot of time coordinating and planning on it, we're really fortunate to have a forester, Nadia Hamey, who used to work for Big Creek Lumber, was involved in the management of this property even under the previous ownership. And she, if you haven't had a chance to meet her, she's terrific. She's got a just tremendous knowledge, tremendous land ethic. She's got a degree in forestry from Cal Berkeley, and is really well aligned in trying to achieve the goals that the partners have laid out in our conservation vision and our management plan for the property. So this property this map highlights both the working forest elements as well as some of the areas where we've been working on our restoration, and that's some of the work that I touched on earlier about growing these large old growth condition trees. You can also see along Warrenella in the light, along the main road, the Warrenella Road that's kind of in orange running through the property, there's a network of planned trails that is really focused along that main thoroughfare through the property. And one of the reasons that's been really important is to allow for large areas of the property that are not impacted by public access and are really maintained for wildlife, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a couple minutes. So you can go on to the next slide here.
Sorry, Dan, thank you. You are so knowledgeable. I just do want to do a time check because we have 3 folks following you. So just bear that in mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
3-4 more minutes. Is that good?
That sounds great. It's
great.
all wonderful. Just thank you.
Good. So this is just a before and after showing a treatment within our working forest area, or I'm sorry, within our restoration area. It's areas where we're working on the making of giants. It's a little hard to see, but the main change you see here is in the before and after is just how much more light is hitting the floor and getting to the forest floor. In the after treatment, you still got large trees. These trees are going to not be competing with some of the smaller trees that were around them before. And that will allow them to, with getting more light, grow more quickly, grow larger canopies that are really essential for some of the marble murrelet habitat that we're hoping to grow out there. I could spend an entire presentation on this, but that just gives you an idea of some of the types of treatments that we're doing. It's very light touch, but it has a real impact over time. We'll go on to the next one here. Another big part of our restoration treatment and treatments throughout the property is doing shaded fuel breaks, which I know the county is really familiar with. There are shaded fuel breaks that both run through the property along the Warrenella Road, as well as along Empire Grade at the top of the property. A lot of this work is done in partnership with the local Fire Safe Council, as well as if you go to the next slide, I believe we had a really exciting opportunity to partner with the Amamutsin Land Trust to incorporate traditional ecological knowledge and native stewardship practices in doing both an ecological and cultural burn within one of the shaded fuel breaks up on this part of the property. So that was a really exciting element that we were able to fold in through our partnership with the Land Trust, the Amamutsin Land Trust, that has been sort of fostered through the stewardship network. We'll go on from there. So as I mentioned, and I'll just touch on this briefly, we've got a partnership with the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County to develop, and this was required as part of our funding through the Coastal Conservancy and the original protection of the property, to develop regionally significant public access. We were just working on starting the construction on this when the fire hit. The plan was to phase it in over 3 phases over a 5 to 10 year period, including pedestrian, bicycle, and horse access. We're going to be really looking at all of that. We remain committed to developing public access out here, but now with the new hazards on the property from all the trees and understanding the impact, that's going to be something we're going to have to, it's another element that we're going to have to consider in moving that forward. And then lastly, another incredibly cool element on this property is the wildlife research that we're doing. We've got a partnership with the UC Santa Cruz Puma Project. They have a number of collared cats on the property. I'm happy to say that we've heard that the 3 lions that were collared on the property all survived the fire. We've heard from Chris Wolmers related to that. And Noel, as I'm talking, you can kind of flip through that. We've got a series of pictures of some of the animals that we spotted with our network of wildlife cameras on the property here. We're trying to get an understanding of just the distribution of wildlife out there. I think that's the last one. And now that's going to be repurposed so we can understand what the changes are in wildlife from the fire. We're going to have to reestablish that entire, we had a network of about 40 cameras on the property focused up in that Dead Man Gulch area on the north part of the property. This shows so now changing to the impacts from the fire, this shows an overlay of our ownership with burn severity. And you can see, as I think most folks know, when that fire blew up Tuesday night into Wednesday, it made a rush south through Big Basin. And as I mentioned, you can see where it burned hot in the northern part of our property, Dead Man Gulch. And if you flip to the next one, it shows a blow up of our property where you'll see that it really burned in a mosaic. On the top of this property, or on the top of this slide here, you'll see what it looks like in some of the areas that burned really hot, reminiscent of some of the slides that Scott and Nicholas showed earlier. On the bottom side, though, you'll see there are a lot of trees in areas that burned less hot, particularly in the southern part of the property, where there's a lot of, the needles are browned, but they're still on the trees, and we expect that most, if not all, of these trees will survive. We expect a lot of the redwoods, even in areas that look like they do on that top slide, will survive as well. I'm sure there's some tree mortality. Our biggest concern is related to the Doug fir, which are really critical on this property for potential murrelet habitat. and we do not think fared very well. And so that's going to be a real concern going forward. We're just starting to assess impacts out here. We're partnering with the resource conservation districts and CAL FIRE to understand initial impacts. We're going to be working really close with our partners going forward, addressing some of the acute early impacts before winter, and then lots of planning going forward about what are, how we may reshape our reserves on this property. It's going to change everything out there, and it's a lot to wrap our heads around, but that keeps the work interesting, I guess. So I will stop there. Thank you for bearing with that whirlwind of information, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. I have one just before handing over. It sounds, like there's a lot of work ahead. And I don't know to what extent much of it is like highly skilled versus relatively less skilled, but just since this is not a brand new challenge, obviously, but it is one that will be increasingly pressing for us in the future of fire management and dealing with the recovery thereafter. And like, to what extent has Post or could Post partner with the county to connect up with workforce development and see about turning this into meaningful work for people, since it will be with us for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab at that. It's even before the fire, there was a lot of conversation within our land conservation community about how to connect the economic recovery with, the development of jobs within conservation and land management, especially with, so many folks having a renewed interest in recreation, new folks coming to the recreation sphere during the time of the pandemic and all of the interest in our parks. And yeah, there is going to need to be, real development of skills within the Santa Cruz Mountains. Even before the fire, one of the greatest challenges to on the ground management was the lack of a skilled workforce for forest management. The fallers for managing our timber are, it's an aging cohort. And there's an exciting opportunity to develop new workforce. The work that the Amamutsan are doing with their Native Stewardship Corps and other workforce development stuff like that is, I think, a really great opportunity to bring new folks, young folks, into this type of work. Folks with, coming from a real diverse set of backgrounds to do this type of work.
And do you connect with like our local community colleges for that kind of thing?
We have not done that yet, and I think that we're not likely to be developing that, most of that in-house. It's likely going to be through partnerships with organizations that are going to be developing more of the boots on the ground type of work and skills in forest management and fire management, Conservation Corps, Native Stewardship Corps, RCDs. There's a huge opportunity, as well as in the fire management area. There's just sort of pre-fire in the last year, there's been a conversation about getting a local TREX, which is wildland fire management training, going in this region. I think that's a tremendous opportunity and need, because while CAL FIRE has an interest in increasing fire management, I think there's a need for real local on the ground knowledge about how we manage fire in our local ecosystem.
Yeah, and I'll also say, I think we recognize there's a big need, and we're still assessing what role Post should play in that, and working with the public agency partners. So we're open to understanding first what the needs are, and then figuring out how we engage with that.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I know from like the workforce development side, often it's that job at the end that can be the hardest to find, even if you understand what the credentials are and what have you. So if that's, if you represent the end of the pipeline and can help explain what the needs are through the County Workforce Development Agency, which I'm sure Nicholas could put you in touch with, I think that would be really meaningful future building for people.
Cool.
Yeah. Other commissioners, I'll go in reverse order this time, I guess. Commissioner Mialis, questions for this group? You might be on mute. You are on mute. You are
You're on mute.
Start again. You are still on mute. Janet, can you help him?
Sure.
You're stuck on mute.
Yeah, he's not.
Ah,
There you
oh,
go.
well done.
Try again, Neil.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no questions. Just thank you, Dan, for the presentation. It'll be interesting to see how you deal with this going forward. Yeah, if you can make anything positive out of it in terms of restoration and preservation.
Thank you. Commissioner Okello?
No comment. Just want to thank folks for purchasing Fruity Landing and keeping it as open space. But Danielle and Noel, thank you for your presentation.
Well,
You're welcome.
Commissioner Manna?
Thank the gentleman for great exemplary work. Just a question, that I can, make simple, maybe not simple when I ask, but in all honesty, in your body of work, did you find this in the capacity of your knowledge that the fires were probably the most overwhelming thing that you guys could have dealt with in doing this work? What was this setback along with COVID, these fires that happened in the course of your training and experience, did you find this to be the most challenging?
Noel, you want to handle that, or I'm
Yeah,
happy to.
I mean, it's a great question. It's definitely fire is part of the local ecosystem here. We know that fire is something that's a reality, but we had not anticipated that the entirety of San Vicente Redwoods would burn. And so, yeah, it's a huge challenge, and definitely the biggest challenge since I've been at Post in terms of where we go for it from here on a property like this. Added on to COVID, yes, exactly, it definitely amplifies it.
Yeah, I'll just add real quick. I mean, it's traumatic, and I think all of us are dealing with that. It's quite a shock to the system, and I think it's going to take a long time for the landscape to heal, but I think there's also, like, our staff is still going through that process of healing as well, and so we're trying to be mindful about that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. One last question. Thank you. One last question for me then, just since you mentioned it'll take a while, in terms of expected time frame to public access. I mean, like, do you have an estimate about like what we're talking about here in terms of, or it's really just starting?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to hazard a guess at that right now, because I haven't even had a chance to be out to the property yet. And, similar to your properties, there's still things burning on the ground. So it's really hard to say. I know our partners are chomping at the bit to get out there and start planning and thinking about that, but we're really still in the early phases here.
Thank you. Fair enough. All right. Shall we take public comment on this presentation?
Great. We are now opening public comment for item 6.2.1. If your hand is raised, your name will be called for this item. I will lower your hand after you speak. Those joining by telephone can press *9 to raise your hand now.
Thank you. And we'll give folks just a minute to find the little raise hand button at the bottom of the participants menu. I don't see any. Do you see anything, Janet?
Seeing none, no.
Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment for this item and move on to the next presentation. Thank you both so much again for all of that. 6.2.2 from the Amametsan Tribal Band, Valentin Lopez. And
Heather, I think if it's possible, we'd be able to split Val and the RCD. I know Sheena is limited on time, and if all speakers are okay with it, I'm interested in what the commission's thoughts are.
Val, is that okay for you? Or it's no problem? Okay. As long as it's okay for you, it's okay for me. So we will switch and instead call we'll hold on 6.2.2 and call 6.2.3, the San Mateo Resource Conservation District, Kellex.
Kellex. Yeah, hi, thank you. My name is Kellex Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of the San Mateo RCD, our Resource Conservation District. And thank you for accommodating us. Sheena has a toddler at home that is beginning to unravel. And we just want to make sure she can get through this. So thank you.
Good luck to all of us.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, or attempt to share my screen, and let's see how this goes. Let's see. There we go. Do you see a full screen? You do. Great.
Good.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So I am going to go out on a limb and assume that many of you have heard about the RCD, but most of you are not super familiar with actually what we are and what we do. So Sheena and I are going to talk a little bit about how we're partnering with you all in forest health and fire resiliency. We're going to start a little bit with who we are first. So I'm the executive director. Sheena manages our forest health and fire resiliency program. We'll talk more about the work that we're doing with you all on wildfire prevention projects, essentially. So in her program, she manages prevention, response, and recovery, all through a conservation lens and typically rooted in forest health. Sheena also coordinates the San Mateo County Fire Safe Council, and she co-leads the Coastal Regional Prioritization Group with CAL FIRE for the state's Forest Management Task Force. So we feel very lucky to have her, and I'm glad that she's able to join us tonight, and we'll see how it goes. So a little bit about the RCD. So we are a special district in San Mateo County. There's about 100 across California, and we're kind of known as boots on the ground. Getting it done is our brand, essentially. We work with public and private landowners all throughout our region. Actually, our boundaries are on the left. We primarily serve the western half of the county, but we can work outside of our boundaries and do. We've been around since 1939 and exist in partnership with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And what we do is we provide confidential, non-regulatory technical assistance for very diverse landowners and land managers and jurisdictions and interests. We also actually design and implement conservation projects, which is a lot of where we worked with you all. And then we also do a great deal of education and outreach to empower people to be able to be stewards of the lands in San Mateo County. Our program areas fall into these categories. Water, we do a lot having to do resolve conflicts between fish and farms and domestic uses of local water resources. Just to state the obvious for those who aren't familiar, on the south coast of San Mateo County, there is no utility. There's no intertie with the State Water Project. There's no snowpack. And so these water resources are needed for firefighting, for endangered salmon, for all of the agriculture, and for the residences, as well as the campgrounds and recreational uses. We're involved with water quality monitoring, water quality protection. We're very involved in climate, both from the perspective of adapting to climate change, as well as mitigating climate change by sequestering carbon, taking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it in biologically diverse, healthy soils and forests. We have a program that is really focused primarily on threatened and endangered species, helping them recover from the brink of extinction. Much of our work is in food systems and other aspects of agriculture and helping agriculture be viable and thrive on these lands. And our newest program area was the Forest Health and Fire Resilience Program, just in time for what appears to be a 500-year fire event of historic proportions in our county. And our partnership with county parks is actually quite extensive. We've partnered on a number of habitat restoration projects in Pescadero Creek and San Bruno Mountain, for butterflies, for steelhead, for coho salmon. The bottom left photo here is the dam that we removed that was in Memorial Park. That was a barrier to fish passage and opened up tens of miles of largely inaccessible migration habitat for endangered fish, threatened and endangered fish. We are helping you all remove dams also at Sanchez Adobe, and we assessed almost all of your properties for barriers to fish migration. We've partnered with you extensively on rural roads, managing, maintaining, winterizing rural roads for the mutual benefits of protecting the roads and reducing how much sediment they deliver into local creeks that's harmful to the habitat. It's because of that project that we had Cruz available that Scott Lombardi talked about earlier to be able to pivot to firefighting. We've worked with you on roads from Pacifica through to Pescadero. We work with you on feasibility analysis, designs, and implementation of water system improvements in your parks that have conservation benefit and help you have water supply reliability and also help you meet your objectives for fisheries. And we've partnered with you on the Tanitas Beach project. We worked actually with the previous landowners who had asked for technical assistance and are poised to be your conservation partner for restoration and management of that property. And finally, we have been integrating much of our restoration work with some of the trails and access needs that you have regionally and specific to properties. So our partnership with county parks is really quite vast. In addition to the collaboratives like the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network, and I kind of joke that like I basically have Nicholas on my red phone, you know, so Nicholas and I are on the phone when things come up. I think that trust, that level of fluidity and comfort and familiarity that we have is exactly why we were able to be so nimble on a dime when the big fires hit, to be able to repurpose our crews and our contracts, et cetera, is because we have a lot of trust and we know how to leverage each other's assets and what tools we have. So along those lines, the fire response during this fire, I won't go into any detail about this because Scott did talk about this, but I think this image can show why the work that we were already doing on Old Hall Road, why Old Hall Road was so valuable to hold the line. So you can see where the fire was going, and had it gone across that road and up north, it would have been a while before there would have been another really good place to be able to control that fire. The fact that we had those crews out there on this road, and they were CAL FIRE certified crews, and we already have relationships with CAL FIRE and county parks, and CAL FIRE and county parks have relationships with each other that Scott described. The three entities could figure out almost instantly how to repurpose those crews to do this work, to be able to create a new access for firefighting, be on site to create breaks, and some of the other work that Scott described before. And that ability to be nimble in our partnership has a lot of benefits. So then when it comes to forest health, why don't I pass this over to Sheena for sort of a brief ecology lesson here. Sheena, do you want me to advance slides for you?
Yep, that sounds good. Thank you. You can stay on this slide for a second. Thanks. Yes, so let's go into like a very short ecology lesson about forest health. In California, our vegetation has been shaped by fire. And some of this includes the fire management by indigenous communities. Our wet winters and our dry summers don't provide conditions for decomposition, which might happen in warmer or wetter climates. So instead, you have to remember that when our fires and vegetation accumulate in plant material, instead of that decomposition might happen elsewhere, it's fire in our ecosystem that reduces this matter. So I bring that up just to emphasize and bring up that fire is an important element of our forest health. Next slide, please. But what is forest health? What is a healthy forest? A healthy forest in the broadest sense It's able to maintain unique species composition and processes, meaning all of its biodiversity, its ecosystem processes, its ecosystem services. In our modern era of fire suppression, there's been a buildup of vegetation and fuels, which would have otherwise been reduced by these frequent low intensity fires. And when we've had this buildup, these are not healthy forests. As stewards of the land, we have to consider this, and we have to consider what we want when we want our forests to be healthy. Therefore, if we acknowledge that there has been a buildup of fuels, we have to recognize that a healthy forest is a managed forest. We need to reduce our fuels that have accumulated over this time. And a healthy forest also includes fire, or can include mechanical fuel reduction that mimics fire in a landscape, which brings that fuel down. And a healthy forest also maintains biodiversity and ecosystem function and services. We need to consider that it's not just the trees, but the interactions that support the whole ecosystem and watershed health. So this includes, removing invasive species and protecting these rare species habitat that we're all concerned about. So one thing I wanted to bring up too is sometimes fuel reduction is used interchangeably with forest health. And how does fuel reduction play into this idea of a healthy forest? So there's this use of fuel reduction, meaning forest health. That's not always the case. But more precisely, what fuel reduction focuses on reducing the type and arrangement and quantity of flammable material to alter fire behavior. So in like the most simple sense, if we could reduce fuel in an area, and that would hopefully result in a low intensity fire where otherwise a high intensity fire might grow if the material wasn't removed. So in wildlands, this fuel refers to dead and living material, and the reduction of which can contribute to forest health. But just to be clear, fuel reduction is only a component of forest health if we use it for that purpose. And in the cases of the projects that we're working on with county parks, fuel reduction is used for that purpose of managing forest health. So you can see that in that image. Dan also showed that earlier too about using the fuel reduction and removing pre-treatment to post-treatment. And so you have the excess fuels have been removed, vegetation has been cleared out, and the latter fuels have been reduced, which would reduce the spread to a canopy fire, which can be possibly more catastrophic. So with that overview, I'll hand it back over to Kelix, and she can share a little bit more about our projects. Thanks.
Sure. So as I mentioned, there's sort of our work in our forest health and fire resiliency program has sort of three buckets. There's things that we want to do to prevent or minimize the impact of catastrophic fire. There's what we weren't planning on, which is what we would do during a fire. And then there's a lot that we're doing for post-fire recovery. So because the RCD works across all these different property lines, we work extensively with private landowners. We've been out on a number of properties since the fire. And I can tell you it's devastating. We've been in White House Canyon and up in Gazos Creek, areas where pretty much everybody lost their homes. And back in Butno Canyon, where hazardous trees fell and destroyed someone's home that had survived a fire. And we are working every day with people who've lost absolutely everything. And it is absolutely devastating when people don't know where their pet is or can't even drive the roads because the culverts have melted and can't get to the site that their home was on, and their whole life was in these redwoods and now it's a moonscape. So from that perspective, I can tell you that your land management really also matters, not only for the resources that you manage, but in terms of being a good neighbor, and that people in the communities around the properties that you own really appreciate and notice when you're managing your forests, because it's where they live. So thank you for the intention and thought and care that you're bringing to the forest management. So with some other partners, and we've been working on a regional approach to reducing fuel loads in Santa Cruz and San Mateo counties. with a grant for over $5 million to do some larger scale fuel load reduction projects that are rooted in forest health. 2 of those are on your property, and we've been enjoying partnering with you on that. So that's Huddard County Park and Wonderlick County Park. And in fact, the vast majority of the grant that we received is going to San Mateo County Parks. So of the 459 acres that we'll be treating, 415 of those are on County Parks property. And we're really excited about that and looking forward to other ways that we can work together as well. These will be treatments similar to what you did in Quarry Park, where mostly mechanical masticators on gentler slopes, and cutting these understory ladder fuels, and etc. This is a little bit of a timeline. I won't go through the whole timeline, but just wanted to give you a sense of how we're working together now. And I just also want to give a shout out to what it's like for our staff to work with your staff. We know, we work every day with Hannah and Scott and Ranger Rob, and, so many people at County Parks. It feels like an extension of our capacity, and I hope that we feel the same way. There's so much intelligence and knowledge and skills and history on your staff. And I think that we bring some complementary skill sets. And I find that the way that we've been able to leverage each other's investments, county makes an investment. We've brought in millions of dollars to do in grants to implement projects and leverage your investments. You have, biological monitors, and we have this, and et cetera. And I think that we are really getting savvy about how we can accomplish more together. And I just wanted I haven't been in front of this commission before, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to say how great your team is and how very much we enjoy working with them and learning from them. So with that, I wanted to keep this somewhat brief. I promised that we would, although we're happy to discuss anything that you're interested in, and also happy, Commissioner Green, if you want to talk a little bit about the economic piece and workforce development piece at any point. That's something that we've been really engaged around, and I'd be happy to discuss that with you as well.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to follow up. I do want to keep it short for questions, just so we can get through the agenda today, but I hope you'll humor me with just a couple of questions. One, thinking about the resources available, I saw there's the $1 billion state federal partnership for fuel reduction, right? Something like the state was going to put in a whole bunch of money and the feds were going to complement. Is that will you be applying for that? Does Parks apply for that? Do we apply in partnership? How does that work? Because I mean, 115 acres is wonderful, but also the fire we just had was 86,000 acres, and it seems like there's a lot to do.
Right. Yeah, and so just keep in mind that 400 and something acres was in San Mateo County, and then there's a lot more acreage in Santa Cruz County. So we've been working regionally. But who would apply for a grant is something we do on a case-by-case basis. Very often it's easier for the RCD to apply for a grant because we're a smaller entity and we can be more nimble, and it doesn't have to go through all of the machinations of the county. So often the way we work together, though not always, is that we would apply for and manage a grant, and then the county would provide some match funds or in-kind match with staff. Mm-hmm. And then in addition, since the RCD is working with all of these other landowners and agencies, and we have these other collaboratives going on, typically what we will do is, to be more competitive, we will partner with these other entities that are completely outside of your jurisdiction, so that we're more competitive for getting those funds and can get bigger allocations. And that's something that it would be harder for the county to do, but is easier for us to do because of our entity.
Thank you. And do you do like Cal OES hazard mitigation grants as well? Do you do that?
We don't have any currently, no.
That's just like a rolling pot. It's huge. I mean, I work up for the city of San Francisco.
Yeah, thank you.
Encourage you to take a look there.
Thank you.
Okay, fellow commissioners, questions for these two presenters?
Questions?
Neil, Commissioner Okello?
Yeah, I do. I know you're a special district, and in a sense, you're a governmental entity. I'll preface my question with this statement. I think we as human beings are the worst enemies for forests. And so, because a lot of us live in forests, if a fire occurs, you say fires are essential for forest health. If fires do occur, the reason that we expend so much energy to fight them is to really save lives rather than saving the forest.
Right.
And so to what extent does your agency work with all the other political jurisdictions in terms of trying to limit human habitation in forested areas?
We don't do that at all. The RCD is not an advocacy organization or a regulatory organization. We provide technical assistance where we're invited to help people with very diverse values best manage their natural resources. And we pretty much start from a position of the fact that there are people on the landscape and that there are working lands, farms, ranches, commercial forests, as well as protected areas. So we don't get involved in that. What we do get involved with is more along the lines of how to find the win-win, how to make things more sustainable, how to empower people and give them the resources to best manage the forested areas when they're there and that sort of thing. And we work extensively with other governmental agencies.
Thank you. And anything, Commissioner Manning, any questions? Let me just see.
None at this time. Thanks for a great presentation, and thanks for being very elaborative and getting a better understanding of what it is that you guys do and the level of concentration that it took to complete this task.
Thank you. Thank you from me also. And one of the questions I have, but I'm eager to hear from Val, is about how the tribes figure into the partnership of land stewardship and conservation and everything that you're working on. So I look forward to hearing that from him. And then maybe when we follow up, we can discuss, how that gets integrated in the workforce piece as well. But with that, I will close my remarks. I guess let's check for public comment on this item.
We are now opening public comment for item number 6.2.3. If your hand is raised, your name will be called for this item. I will lower your hand after you speak. Those joining by telephone can press *9 to raise your hand now. Seeing none.
Seeing none, thank you. So we'll close public comment on this item and now call item 6.2.2. Val Lopez with the Amamutsan Tribal Band. Thank you so much for adjusting the schedule. Off mute.
You're welcome, Chairwoman and Commissioners. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak tonight. My name is Valentin Lopez, and I'm the chairman of the Amamutsan Tribal Band. I'm also president of the Amamutsan Land Trust. Our tribe is comprised of the descendants of the indigenous peoples that were taken to Mission San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz. I'm going to go kind of quick, so I'm going to jump around a little bit, but I always give a little bit of history so people understand who we are. A lot of people think that our people were, well, a lot of people, they wrote that our people were extinct, but we're still here. And then it's been written a lot of the California Indians as being hunters and gatherers. We were not hunters and gatherers. We were very effective land stewards and land managers. Our creation story tells us that Creator very specifically gave us the responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and all living things within our tribal territory. And for thousands of years, that's what our people did. 12, 14, 15,000 years or more. And if you think of that in terms of generations, that's 800, 900, perhaps 1,000 generations or more at a minimum that our people have been here. And we learned how to take care of our environments. We learned how to take care of the wildlife, of the finned, the winged, the four-legged. We learned how to take care of the plants, the rivers, the ocean, the sea mammals, the shellfish. Our people studied those for thousands and thousands of years so they can fulfill that obligation with the Creator to take care of Mother Earth. Then came the horrible, brutal times of three periods of colonization: the Spanish mission period, the Mexican period, and then the California American period. All three periods, their treatment of the California Indians meet the United Nations definition of genocide. And our population was reduced by 98% or more based on that history. From the end of the 1800s through 1960, through the early 1960s, our people, just lived underground. We lived in tents along rivers, or we lived in very small houses, and normally almost in the valley. Most of them were in the valley. Once the Santa Clara County moved and moved from agriculture, the Valley of Heart's Delight, once those orchards went away, our job work disappeared here. And so we went to the valley where agriculture was still working. My uncles and aunts and my great aunts, my grandmother, very few of them knew how to read or write. And so we could not transition to a different economy than agriculture at that time. The tribe started forming the tribe in the late 1980s. And then in 1991, our tribe passed the Constitution. That was very foreign to us because our people did, traditionally our people did not have constitutions like that. But that's what the federal government required. They wanted to, if we wanted to deal with it. In 2001, the elders asked me to run for chair. I ran for chair, and in 2003, I was elected chairperson of the Ama Mutsun. In 2006, the elders came to our council meeting and told us, our creation story tells us that we have the responsibility to take care of Mother Earth, and that obligation was never rescinded by Creator. That remains our obligation today, and we have to find a way to do it. We were a very poor tribe. We don't even own an inch of land within our territory. We were saying, how are we going to do that? It sounded impossible. But when the elders asked, that's a directive. And so we did what our people always do. We prayed and asked Creator, and we asked our ancestors to help us find a way to get back to the path of taking care of Mother Earth. And shortly after that, the superintendent of Pinnacles National Park came in and asked us to come on into the park, and he wanted us to have a say about how the park was managed and how the plants were stewarded, et cetera. And we kind of understood that could very well be answers to our prayers, but at the same time, it was very scary because we had lost so much of our indigenous knowledge that it was embarrassing to say, what do you have? What is this plant called? Is this plant a medicine or food, or what's this plant used for? We lost that knowledge. And we talked about it at the tribal council, and they said, we have to recognize that it's not our fault. And at the same time, we have an obligation to restore that indigenous knowledge. And so we started working with Pinnacles. Then we started working with state parks and UC Berkeley. We had a real strong research program to help us restore that indigenous knowledge. Today we work with Stanford, Berkeley, UC Santa Cruz, and many other colleges and universities. We have agreements with UCLA and Davis as well. And so we have agreements with MOUs with the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District, Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, Semper Virens, and quite a few other land managers and holders. We're one of the founding members of the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network. And what we're doing is we're working to restore indigenous knowledge to the lands that our ancestors stewarded and took care of. Now we're talking fire today. We saw fire as being a gift given to us by Creator. That gift provided us food, warmth, light at nighttime when it was dark. And we also allowed us to cook our foods. And it was a tool for managing landscapes. The way our people would do it is they would look at a particular landscape and they would divide it into segments. And it could be 7, 8, 9 segments, for example. And then they would burn one segment a year. And then when they were done there, they'd go back and start all over. That first year growth, a lot of the seed plants need fire and smoke to help them germinate so that we can get real high production of seeds. And that's exactly what happened. So after that first year of fire, there was a lot of seeds there, and that's our way of taking care of the birds and the other seed-eating animals. And at times ourselves, because at times our diet was 40% seed. That second year of growth, you start getting higher shoots, and that took care of the grazing animals, the deer, the elk, the antelope, etc. That third year of growth, you start getting more bushy plants, and those were important for our leafy vegetables and stuff like that. We had over 100 native California plants for our food plants. Those were wiped out. Our food plants were mostly wiped out. Today, when you drive down any freeway, 99, 80, 680, the landscape you see is 96% or more non-native. Those are all invasives that you're seeing. And so we would burn, and then the thicker plants allowed for other kinds of crafting and stuff. We would like to restore that tradition of burning, restore it to the landscapes. We're working now at Quiroste Valley, which is in San Mateo County. And we're restoring a lot of the coastline. That Central California coast was a coastal prairie. During the mission time, they outlawed burning. The Mexican time outlawed burning. The American time, they outlawed burning. And so when they stopped the burning, all of the shrubs and the Doug fir and the redwoods, they moved in. So now that coastal prairie is just about gone. That coastal prairie was one of the most biodiverse landscapes in North America. We lost that biodiversity. Our tribe's trying to get that diversity back. We're trying to restore the coast, and we're trying to, and stuff. So now we're cutting a lot of trees to restore the coast there at Quiroste Valley. And this year we're restoring our plants. Our plants, they develop very deep root systems, and the native plants are very resistant to fire, to drought, to flooding. And they're very resistant to disease, because the way we took care of our plants, they had to provide for a full community. The fungi, the insects, the four-legged people. And that made them very sturdy and hardy plants. And they're recognized around the world as being very resistant to many of the diseases that are impacting a lot of the commercial vineyards and fields. The strawberries, the strawberries, the nuts, a lot of the nut crops, and a lot of the vineyards around the world use the California rootstock on our plants there, for disease. So whenever you burn at that frequency, what happens is you get a very low intensity fire. That fire does not burn hot at all. And it does not start the trees on fire. And if it's managed correctly, and you cut the ladder fuel before you light it on fire, and you would just let that fire run for a particular distance that's marked, and there it would put itself out, or the people would be there to put it out. We worked with Cal Fire on this. We worked with state parks on this. We worked with National Park, the National Park Service on this down at Pinnacles National Park. But this, you know, and if they were doing indigenous burning now, those catastrophic fires that we saw in the Santa Cruz Mountains would not have happened. That was preventable if we had indigenous burning occurring on the landscapes there. And that's really important to take note of. And now after that fire, a lot of that landscape is cleaned. So now is a good time to restore indigenous burning, because now we can start developing the landscapes that allow us to bring in indigenous burning and to start controlling it so that it can burn from this area to that area and be distinguished. There would be segment 1, segment 2, segment 3. It'd be easy, you know, it'd be a lot easier now to market. Now in November 17th, 18th, or 19th, we're still choosing the day, and it's going to be from 3 to 4:30 or 3 to 4:30. We are holding a symposium, a Zoom symposium, and we'd like to invite, you know, the commissioners and others from the park to join this Zoom call. And we're going to be talking about indigenous burning. What is it? How is it effective? And on that call, I will talk about our traditional use of fire. And then there's another, and then we are part of the California Tribal Fire Council. We're still working on that name. We're just coming together now. But we have tribes from the Klamath up at the Oregon border down to the Kumeyaay down at the San Diego border. And we're all coming together to restore fire to the landscapes of California. The person that will be talking that night will be Don Hankins. Don is a Native American who's been burning his whole life. He's also a fire scientist who works at Chico State. He'll be talking about his experience in indigenous burning. And then also Kent Lightfoot from UC Berkeley. He's an archaeologist, but we did a lot of research at Kidoste Valley, and he can tell you what does the archaeological record show about indigenous burning in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And he's going to talk about that research, about how our people have been burning there for thousands of years at that very high frequency. Also, Scott Stevens, he's one of the top, I wouldn't be surprised if San Mateo County was very familiar with Scott Stevens. He's one of the top fire ecologists in the state of California. And he looked into indigenous burnings a number of years ago, and now I speak at his class. For the last 3 years, I spoke at his class. I'm scheduled to speak at his class sometime later this month. I'll be speaking at his class again on indigenous burning, and he's teaching a class on fire at his, to students at UC Berkeley, and he will talk about his experience with indigenous fire and his knowledge and how he's recommending it. They actually have applied for and received a grant, a research grant to restore fire to the Santa Cruz Mountains. So we're looking into that now. And we'd like to invite all of you to that symposium to learn more about fire. And I told you it's important that we restore our native plants. I talked about our native plants again, but they have to go hand in hand because our native plants, they develop very deep root systems, so they can survive those other catastrophic events. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a couple of quick questions and then we'll open over. Do you currently have an MOU with the San Mateo County Parks Department?
No, no, we don't. Here, we will have one additional hurdle for our tribe to jump over, and that is San Mateo County is outside our traditional tribal territory.
Mhm.
So we will have to talk to the tribe of the territory to get permission to go onto that land. We have good relationships with them, and we'll invite them to be part of this. And I'm sure that, and I'm sure that they will. I fully expect them to say yes. But we do not have an MOU with San Mateo County.
Understand. Thank you. And then for one thing I understand is that since it's been so long that we've been fire suppressing, that the forests have grown thick, and it's not the same kind of terrain where you would traditionally practice traditional burns, like you were saying, that would have been burned much more regularly and is cleared out. In your opinion, is tribal burning appropriate for land that has not burned recently? And if so, can you talk about why?
Well, if you look at Quito State Valley, I mean, we're cutting down 10,000 trees there. Well, we're not cutting down. We have a permit to cut up to 10,000 trees there. And we probably cut close to 3,000 trees already. And there's something really interesting when that Santa Cruz, when that the Santa Cruz fires came through, everything burned around Quito State Valley, but Quito State Valley itself did not burn. And that's where our people have been working to restore that valley.
Mm-hmm.
And we believe the same would be true with the mountains of Santa Cruz.
So is that you have contracts to clear the land without fire, or are you doing it with fire?
We're doing burn piles now, but we're doing, but we're also preparing, as we're cutting these trees, we're also preparing the lands to return fire to the land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Fellow commissioners, any questions for Val? Commissioner Manna?
Thank you for educating me on the American Indian studies and all the great leadership of the American Indian community, and furthermore their living standards. I mean, I thank you for the abundance of information that going in today, I had taken American Indians and culture courses at university, but up to now, I didn't know that this knowledge existed. So really appreciate you for coming on today.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Okello?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lopez, for a wonderful presentation. And thank you for notifying us about the Zoom symposium on November 18th to 19th. I certainly intend to be there. The question I have for you sort of dovetails on Commissioner Green. The environment has changed tremendously. First of all, the population in the territory that you're talking about has expanded to an extent that it interferes with some of the strategies that may be effective, and some of which you may have suggested in terms of forest management. But there are people that are inhabiting those forests and so on and so forth. And so indigenous burning or fuel reduction and the burning that a lot of counties are doing, may not be as effective, because I think the primary concern is they wanna preserve life. They wanna preserve agricultural land. So it's not so much that there is interest in the health of the forest, but to the extent that human habitation is there, then human habitation takes priority. So in your mind, if you were to do indigenous burning, in this new environment, how differently would you do it from the way it was done for thousands and thousands of years?
Well, we'd have to do much smaller parcels, that's for sure. You know, years back, I mean, they did not have a lot of habitation or a lot of people living in the mountains. You know, so where they would burn, they could tell the weather really well. They say the rain will be here in 2 days, so let's burn for 2 days. And then the fire would go out when the rains came. You know, but now we can't do that kind of burning. So there'd have to be a lot more smaller and a lot smaller burns and a lot more frequent burns to fill in that particular segment of burning and such like that. And that's why we're working with UC Berkeley and stuff like that to try to find out what the and our partners. RCD is one of our partners. Calix is one of our partners. I believe we have an MOU with Calix to help us with our Alma Mutsu Land Trust, and we have and all the other people that we work with. I know the Chukoni Coast Dairy is a national monument of BLM. They're very interested in us bringing fire back to those lands. We have regular meetings and we're talking about how do we accomplish that. But but we know that whenever the people living there and stuff like that, we don't believe they would have approved indigenous burning prior to the Santa Cruz fires. But now, a lot of people lost their houses and stuff like that. They know they have to do something, and we prepared the lands very, very carefully, so that whenever so that it doesn't get out of control, because we want people to have confidence in burning, so they will accept it. So we're very careful in how we're doing this, and we would continue that. I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And Commissioner Miralles, any thoughts or questions? Oh, still on mute. Janet, help him.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. No.
Let's see. There he is.
Sorry, you're good. Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And perhaps now the time is right to go back and use some of the 20,000 year knowledge that we've forgotten about. Maybe it's time to bring that back and thank you for offering to help.
You're very welcome. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this meeting today.
Chair Green?
Yeah. Yes.
Point out that Calix Nelson has her hand raised. So
thank you. I did not see. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to offer a perspective, and Val and Nicholas, please jump in if you feel like I'm not offering this quite the right way. One of the benefits, I think, of the fact that county parks, Amamutsan, RCD, Post, and others are involved in regional collaboratives is so that we don't have to do everything on every parcel of land. We can look at the regional landscape and prioritize where different treatments make sense and be able to manage the land for different types of benefits. So sometimes you might be more focused on carbon sequestration and sometimes on a specific type of habitat or another type of habitat where there's trade-offs between habitats, cultural and indigenous practices. There's a lot of different goals or objectives for managing our land. And when we work together, we don't have to make quite the same choices between them, but we can accomplish them in different places. And along those lines, controlled burns, I think that probably in the foreseeable future, it's not going to be likely feasible to do controlled burns on every inch of land where it might be desirable. There's very limited time of year when you can do it. And there's, at the moment, limited people who have that expertise. There's permits required and risk management and, that sort of thing. So I think that it's really valuable to consider controlled burn as an essential tool in a toolbox and make sure that your tools are very diverse so that you can do what's the right fit for seasonality and land management and risk and neighbors and access and resources and that sort of thing. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there, that there's nothing that's a one size fits all.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And Val, for your tribe, are you at capacity? Which is to say, like, with the people that you have and the knowledge that you have and the resources that you have, are you kind of doing as much as you can at this time, or do you guys have capacity to do more?
We have the capacity to do more.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're a very young land trust. We established in 2012, but we really didn't get going to 2015, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we invite our stewards to come on in. No, we hire our stewards based on what our budget allows.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, we have 8 full-time, 2 part-time stewards working with the tribe, but we have a lot of members. Plus, we have others that, you know, I talked about that council with the other tribes in California. You know, we plan on helping and working together as tribal people on fire projects and stuff like that. You know, but the other thing about our land trust is we have a really strong education component. And that education component is education of our tribal members, but also education of the public. And we say there's not enough Amamutsun to take care of all the lands in the territory. We need to teach others how to do, a traditional stewardship of the lands. We need to teach others, and so we're prepared to do that.
And do you teach park staff in other counties?
Well, you know, right now when we work with state parks, they'll have a lot of their staff out there, and we talk to them. Mm-hmm. But it's not just, this isn't just a labor force. Mm-hmm. We look at the land as being sacred, and we need to restore that sacredness to the land. And also, you know, we look at it, we can't just burn and then just walk away. You need to restore the native plants and stuff like that. I know at San Vicente, for example, there's an area there they showed that where we're burning there with CAL FIRE and others. But we did a lot of research before the fires, before the burn, and then after, And so we have other components as well that are very important to see how well it's impacting the insects and the four-legged, et cetera. And so that's a really important part of our work to make sure that we're fulfilling our obligation to create.
Thank you. Let's see about public comment on this item.
Sure, we're now opening public comment for item number 6.2.2. If your hand is raised, your name will be called for this item. I will lower your hand after you speak. Those joining by telephone can press *9 now.
Thank you.
Seeing that.
I don't see anything either. Before we move on from this item, I want to say thank you again to Val for your time and your presentation. And I do hope, and I would like to call, at a later time, maybe as we get closer to the upcoming budget, understanding that this is not, San Mateo County is not Amamutsun land per se, but that there is a possibility for us to partner if you go through the Ohlone tribe and ask permission. I'd like for the department to explore just what the possibilities are, understanding that one size fits all burning is not necessarily in anybody's best interest to just have one tool in the toolbox, like Alex was saying, but it does seem like there's an important set of resources available to us if we can just figure out ways to take advantage and bring more resources to the tribe so that we can learn from them and empower them and help them to restore the sacredness to this land. I think that's really important work for us to figure out how to do, and we have all the partners on this call. If you're all still here, I hope you are, between Post and RCD and our department. I think that this is important. So, you know, at a later time, I hope we can call this back and hear about how the department can make the most of the tribal resources that we have around us.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned Post at the end. I too want to mention Post. They're good, very good friends and very supportive of our tribe. And we work together with Post as well. So it's very important for us to say. As a matter of fact, after the Santa Cruz burns, we met up in the mountains and Post was there talking to us about restoring the lands, you know, bringing back a traditional stewardship. So thank you very much, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And I see before we close this item, I see Commissioner Okello's blue hand. Go ahead.
Yes, to the chair, Nicholas, as soon as this zone symposium in November, as soon as they confirm the date, could that information be relayed to you and then you can relay to all the commissioners?
I surely will, Commissioner. I'll make sure as soon as we get that date, we're going to announce that far and wide, and we'll make absolutely sure that the commissioners all receive a copy of the flyer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Val.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. So thank you, and we'll move close this item. And I know thank you. I know we're over time. Nicholas, how you want to go for 6.3?
I think if the commission's okay with it, and if staff's okay with it, I will just give a condensed version of the presentation, and we'll have to skip the video that's in it if everyone's all right with it.
That sounds fine.
Yeah,
All right.
if you could make it brief, because I have another obligation at 6:30.
I will be done well in advance of that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Let me do this.
I appreciate it. I have a birthday dinner to attend to.
All right. So really briefly, so you've heard what happened during the fire. You've heard different land management practices. Now bringing that, we have a monumental task ahead of us, and that is, what do we do at Pescadero Creek County Park right now? And it really comes down to 4 actions. So the photo you see here in front of you is Old Hall Road, and this was literally taken during the fire. And you can see that there's debris on the bottom left. You can see a lot of loose soil. You can see a lot of the ash. And we have to figure out, how are we going to keep this sediment out of Pescadero Creek? Figure out how are we going to stabilize these roadways, and we have to figure out how are we going to winterize Pescadero Creek County Park going into this winter. And so this is the video that we're going to skip over. The way we're going to do it is really through 4 efforts. CAL FIRE is doing their suppression repair currently. There's what's called a WERT report, which is the Watershed Emergency Response Team report. It's Parks doing our winterization, and then it's monitoring. What you see here is a map that comes from the post-fire winterization plan for Pescadero Creek County Park. Hannah Ormshaw, the department's natural resource manager, developed, and that has been thoroughly reviewed by staff. And what you're essentially looking at are a series of culverts that will either need to be replaced, cleaned, repaired, a series of trails or roadways that will need to be properly regraded, and certain drainage features installed. And where in particular are we going to want to pay close attention for high vulnerability areas for erosion. So we talked about CAL FIRE suppression repair. Right now they're in the park and they are clearing culverts. They're going to be clearing 17 culverts from debris. They're going to be replacing 3 culverts. They're going to be cutting what's called rolling dips and water bars. So on the right-hand side, you're going to see a rolling dip. On the left-hand side, you see a water bar. And what this all comes down to are different strategies to channel and control water flow, to slow down water flow, and to really control erosion. And so that's our big focus is. I think it's really important to point out that Pescadero Creek is an impaired watershed. And so what that means is it has a high level of sediment that is being deposited into it, and that's having adverse ecological effects. And so for us, it's paramount that we are not further contributing to that sedimentation. So CAL FIRE is on site right now doing their suppression repair. And we are also going to be going through, once CAL FIRE is done, and doing our winterization and our monitoring. So the top two pictures, you might not be able to tell, but those are actually culverts. Those are culverts out of Pescadero Creek County Park right now. What you're looking at is a lot of sediments. As CAL FIRE or county parks and our crew, the contractors that we have with RCD, as they came through during the fire and they had to widen that fire road, you're pushing a lot of that sediment and that dirt out to the sides. And we need to clear all that out. We need to make sure that these culverts are unobstructed. We need to make sure that water can properly flow through, and we need to properly monitor that. The other, on the bottom, the other image you're seeing are straw wattles. And what that does is it allows us to slow down the flow of water. It allows the straw wattles to capture that sediment so it doesn't continue to go down that hill. And it just is another critical control, erosion control measure that we'll be using in the park. And so those are the post-fire efforts that we need to be going through. But we also need to start thinking about the post-winter responsibilities that we have. And for us, what that means is, how do we get Pescadero Creek County Park ready for the public again? But also, what do we need to be doing to help the park rejuvenate, and how do we focus on future land management practices so that we can enhance the ecological value of our park? And so that's something that is going to take time. Post talked about it clearly. That is, we need to look at what the impacts have been. We need to make sure we fully understand what the condition of our park is. And then we need to make science-based decisions on how do we manage this land going forward. One of the things that I think is important to note is likely, and I can't guarantee this, but likely the portion of Pescadero Creek County Park impacted by the fire would be a good candidate for a future burn in a future year after the appropriate work has been done. The area that was not burned by the fire in Pescadero Creek County Park is not ready for something like that. So we can't just go in and start taking certain actions without making sure we've properly prepared the park and the land for that. But these are all things that we're going to have to work with foresters and fire ecologists to understand what is it that we need to be doing to benefit our land as much as we can. And so I really want to highlight that what I think we need to be looking at going forward is kind of this overall system of, when we look at Pescadero Creek, we need to be managing it for forest health. We need to be managing it for fuel reduction. We need to be managing it for carbon sequestration. How do we take science-based management practices and apply that? That's the big question that we're going to have to. I don't have that answer right now. It's too soon after the fire. We haven't been able to properly assess the park. Right now, we are just in a condition where we're trying to make sure that, as you saw earlier, the road system is winterized, that we've installed those water bars and those rolling dips, that our culverts are cleared, that hazard trees are falling on our. So right now, that's where our biggest focus is. But over time, we're going to be able to get into the park and really do a proper assessment. And at that point, we apply the proper land management to Pescadero Creek Park, County Park is the answer that we're going to be looking at. And these three areas right here in front of you are where we're going to be putting our focus, is how do we manage that forest for forest health, to make sure we're managing the fuel loads, and to make sure that we're sequestering carbon, because it's a great candidate for doing some amazing carbon sequestration projects. The last thing getting asked is, when is the park going to be open to the public? So what you're looking at is a map of Pescadero Creek County Park. That northernmost line, red line right here, is Old Hall Road. And that was the eastern fire line. Everything south of that, so Ocean View Trail and Butno Ridge Trail and the Butno Ridge Fire Road itself, are all going to be closed likely for the next 6 to 12 months. I don't see us being in a condition to open that safely. To understand what type of hazard trees we have, we're going to have to rebuild a lot of those trails. As Scott was talking about, you can start walking there and drop 6 inches because the ground is just not stable and firm. But the trails north of Old Hall Road, we're expecting we're going to be able to open much sooner, and hopefully, sometime this winter or spring. And then the same would go for Memorial Park and San McDonald as well. We're hoping to have those open springtime as well. So that is kind of the abbreviated version of the presentation. But right now, we need to make sure that we're properly winterizing the park. We're doing proper suppression repair, and then we're wrapping our heads around what are the next steps for proper land management.
Thank you, Nicholas. I know a couple of us have to go right at 6:30. So Commissioner O'Kello, do you have any questions for Nicholas on this?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Commissioner Manna, anything?
I will pray tonight that we meet in person in December. I know that, just kind of in closing, I know everybody's got to go. This has been very, very difficult. We found ways to deal with it. I spoke to Director Calderon earlier today on just sort of optimism and what our future lies ahead with this commission and this county. So I really pray that we see each other in December. This has been far too long.
Thank you. And Commissioner Merrilies, questions about this piece, Pescadero Creek County Park?
No questions. Yeah. Thanks, Nicholas, for a great
Thank
presentation.
you. Since I can't quite help myself and I don't have as hard a stop, question about the workforce. So, I mean, we were busy before. Now we have a big new to do. Like, do we have adequate resources? Are we applying for grants? Like, is any of this FEMA reimbursable? How will this go?
Yeah, so we are currently processing a FEMA paperwork, and I will tell you that the FEMA process for reimbursements is long, and it's very onerous on staff. But we are getting all that work done though, and once we are able to get everything submitted, we'll find out how much of our work was reimbursed. But we did incur significant costs while assisting CAL FIRE in fire containment activities. But with that said, the money that a lot of where that cost hit was our fuel reduction pot, and so we're going to have to work to get some of that back from FEMA and see what that means for us for the remainder of this fiscal year. But as far as the staff workload, it's something that we're going to have to assess our priorities, and we're going to have to determine where are we putting our staffing resources and what projects are we going to have to put aside for the time being. We don't have that developed at this time. I think for the immediate step, I think we have sufficient staffing resources to get it done. But when we start talking about larger landscape size projects, we're really going to have to take a look at our resources and see what makes the most sense.
Fair. So again, just like a plug for those hazard mitigation grants, which are huge pots of money through the state, for which you do have to complete like a benefits cost analysis that is challenging, but at least when we were doing them up at the county, up at San Francisco, like they were seeking projects. So, fire mitigation is like right up their alley. So I don't, if you've not done one of those before, I'd be happy to, just kind of show you the piece of the application, if that would be at all helpful. And just related, I mean, it just seems to me that the topic we're talking about here, like kind of our foreseeable future at the confluence of climate resilience and surge work and employment and environmentalism, and also just like getting people working, it does seem to be at the nexus of a lot of different priority streams. And so I don't know do you have like a grant seeker in the department? Like who keeps an eye on different revenue streams?
Yeah, so the county has a contract with a grant writing firm who monitors grant opportunities and will make departments aware of of the opportunities as they fit for what our priorities are. And so that's how we typically monitor for grant opportunities. Also, as you saw during the presentation that RCD gave, oftentimes we are also working with our partners to look at large regional grant opportunities, which tend to be more competitive and frankly beneficial for the region.
Sure, that's great. So I guess it's great to know that that's centralized. That's challenging to achieve. I guess I would just put in that, just to like make sure to be in contact with said person or firm, like making them aware of this work for the department and so that they understand kind of the range of things we might be eligible for. Because like I said, I mean, we may not always be a leading candidate for a workforce development grant, but like with this kind of work ahead for years to come, and it's such a range of skills and training opportunities, and like you could really put something nice together. I think that would be interesting and competitive and appeal to a lot of different kinds of funders, environmentalist funders, land stewardship funder, like the whole thing. So yeah, if you could just like connect, however is best to connect, seems worth doing. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, public comment on this item. Ranks are dwindling. Good for the people who are sticking it out.
I know. We're now opening public comment. If your hand is raised, your name will be called. I will lower your hand after you speak. Those joining by telephone can press *9 now to speak. And I am seeing none.
Okay, thank you. And I think in the midst of that item, we lost our quorum. And so perhaps, I think as I recall last time, that meant we stopped. So having gotten through that discussion, no further department items. So we will just talk next time. And I will, our next meeting is just the first Thursday of December. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, cool. And,
where we'll be discussing the calendar and for the 2021 year, as well as commission office positions.
yes, and also I hope other more exciting things about the state of the department. Not that that's not the most interesting stuff. Sounds fine. Okay, well, thank you everyone, and I will adjourn us.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.